Does anybody know why I have a school? Does anybody know why I make videos? Does anybody know why I'm here? If you can understand that, then you can understand yourself. Basically, understand how to control yourself is something that's out of control to bring something back into control that's always been in control. Now, in that lines of all communication system, when we can highline high-rise, directing single location system, how you see yourself in dream decoding is to understand the modification system through all levels and how you interpret yourself. You're interpreters of the dream itself that controls the dreamer of the dream of dreaming. So we're going to get into provisions. That's the test. So we're actually going to go into the test today. The test is actually Friday, but we're going to get more into it to a deeper core. To understand the modification system is to let everything go that you're not in provisions of. So the one thing you want to come into in all lines of communication is nothing. How do we get into nothing? Well, it's process. You're already in nothing. So you don't process that. How do we get into question? We don't question anything because now you're questioning offline communication, which you're questioning of. So now you're in confusion. Getting in that position location is you just being you. But what does that mean, you just being you? I thought I already know who I am. How do you know who you are if you're dreaming? How do you know that what's real and what's not real? How do you know that you can indicate what you're doing in setting? Is dream interpretation of its interpreter. Controlling yourself is evolving yourself. It's just expanding yourself. Is you just being you without any confliction, without any frustration or confusion or separation or distraught or anything in fear of its attraction, setting, location to its systems, because you guys not are interpreting your dreams of what you are of dreaming. And that's all that is. Okay? There's no difference when you come in a position location, still levels, you go to a country, and that lines its communication system. You need an interpreter to communicate, to translate into English. But English is all levels of English that's provided in its dream interpretation, which is frequency. Everything around you of its dream itself is frequency. Everything around you is all levels of dimensional light of frequency. Everything around you, you're like the dimensional beings of energy that's connected to its vibration of frequencies through harmonics. Harmonics is the interpreter. The dreamer is the indication of what you are dreaming, Tango Foxtrot. You are in the dreaming. It's that position. What you have to get out of is to come into yourself, is to identify yourself through its dream decoder. Get in that position, location, and setting. The test is already done in equations, lines of screen adaptation. So you have to understand if your body's going to be there 2 months and it's come to you already, you're seeing that 3 months or 4 months or 5 months or 6 months, you know it's already done. So how could that be a dream? All you have to identify how to understand that through interpretation. That puts you in the mind conception that it's all done. There's nothing to do if it's all done. Your body is already in that setting where your avatar is more controlling your body, saying, hey, listen, this is what's going to happen. All you got to do is follow through nothing, be nothing of anything, nothing of everything. Process that is the mind of empty space. Don't get a provisional location setting in 65 or 75 or 85 or 95% of the time. Always be in the mind of empty space. The brain can't have any clutter at all because it confuses everything that it sees. So what you're seeing, the brain is seeing. That's the conversion of one. All right, sending lines of sequence. We got a panel operation line centers. We're going to get in line course centers in line communication setting in decoding. Fragmentation lines of defrags. Course centers are fragmentation lines of fractals, directing ground centers lines of surface deposition location travel. Center ops. Center communication lines of center communication height settling lines of travel. Sending travel endpoint lines interpreter. Eagles lines of dreamer into position of dream into line communication of dreaming in set attractions. Interpreter in the dream interpretation that sets course centers of the dream, Tango Foxtrot. High course centers, flush lines directs the location of dreaming in set calculation screen adaptation. That's flux screens adaptation of service in rotation line connection setting and traction. Okay, very powerful stuff. So everything you're doing in your life is trying to control everything you're not. Isn't that interesting? So, sir, my whole life is a question, isn't it? Yes, it is. And what is a question? So if you see a question in space, now this is where we're going to get into the dream decoding. Dream decoding is the defrag to defrag. That process is the position location, how you see the oscillogically, your system location, your system off to travel. The brain is the conversion. The operation system location system is the avatar. That's remote controlling your body and its network that's already done through its equation, through its 8 lines of a question. It's infinity 8. Your infinity 8 is Earth lines of 1, Earth lines of 6, Earth lines of 12. 3 settings, lines of core centers, line travels in rotation system off the calculation. That's all it is. You're keeping yourself in yin and yang of balance, right? Setting lines of screen. All right, so we set positional walls, fading screen, adaptation, light lines, metaphors, high position, location, travel. Directing grounds, high lines of sequence, high lines of panel. Process indication system, all through travel. Whoa, look at that. Why do you think yin and yang? What is the process of yin and yang, right? So what's going on here and what's going on here? Hello, this is lines of 3 signals location. This is your avatar here, this is your avatar here, this is your avatar here, 3 7. All through constellation, all through Orion's belt, right? You are on the ground. This is your Earth right here. Boom. Right? Following these sequence lines, the ground lines, and sequence lines of panels, bodies, and sequence lines of communication, network location, setting high positional levels. 3 months is already done through equation. Right? Sets tractions. There's pi. Right there. Traction. There's pi. Set tracking. Pi. 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 Direct and redirect. There you go. Bounce. Open up the portal. Open the Stargate. Our line, set location, setting, and track communication. Security line defense. Whoa. Powerful stuff. So that's what goes on, right? To understand the interpreter is you understanding the interpretation of what you're doing through conception, of the mind of inception, knowing exactly you see a graph screen in space and 3 arrows of indications. Okay? What does that mean when I see 3 arrows of indication of a box? It's in space. Your brain's trying to convert your system. So the brain itself is decoding itself. Trying to understand what you're seeing. It's showing you how powerful it is of its own consciousness. If we can get grounded with the dream interpretations, then we understand the process of what we're seeing on the earth. And that's the balance of the mind, of conception. So you have to control the visions of what you're coming to in seconds, minutes, and hours. Why am I seeing numbers? Why am I seeing letters? Why am I seeing shapes? Why am I seeing frames? All right? It's all given to you of conscious awareness and in that position of its alignment, helping you and guiding you, getting you in position so you don't get confused of where your body's going to be next. Okay? Box frame. Triangulation of 3 arrows and indication set. And what does that mean to your earth? What does that mean? This is all dream and the position, all levels. This is the decoding that gets you in position. Just to understand it, communicate with the brain frequencies of the brain itself. Because it's all different frequencies. The actual brain that's here instead of attractions, what is it in position of? Just creating. It doesn't have a past, it doesn't have a present, it doesn't have a future. It's not here or there, but there when needed. But you have to decode in your system location a defrag and set position of copying paste and set position enabled, line communication set and embedded in position of implementation. Setting lines of travel. So what does the box triangulation mean in 3 arrows, right? Right? This is what it means on the earth. And when you get grounded with the earth, you're getting grounded with the mind line communication system all through travel, right? All right, so the box line screen adaptation system is you going in 4 directions. You're going to be here, you're going to be here, you're going to be here, and you're going to be here. Okay? So the triangulation is the 3-point lines of graphs. It's attractions and communications. What does that mean in indication setting? In set tractions? You're dancing at 3 lines of angles in a box frame, right? So you're dancing here, here, and here in set position. 2-step, square dance, set position, all lines of travel. 3 different direction settings of footsteps in travel communications. That's what it means in indication, which means you're dancing and the brain is seeing that. Through dream interpretation. Decoding in set positional locations all through traction. And that's what it means to its earth. So what you're doing here, 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 what you're doing everywhere in your seconds, minutes, and hours, your brain is converting its system of recording. Everything you do in set tractions. Everything you do in set tractions. But it does it through a dream interpretation. You are the interpreter. So you have to control of what's going on in the dream so you can control the dreaming. And it's much easier because you see what's going on in the seconds, minutes, and hours, where the brain records everything. The body records everything. Everything around you records everything you say. But you don't see that because you don't understand how to decode in your system, to your binaries, to your algorithms, to your encryptions. Okay? You constantly create all levels of thinking and hesitating. Distraught of this, distraught of that, not understanding that, not understanding that. Sir, I don't understand what I'm doing. Sir, I don't understand what's going on. Stop questioning yourselves. Stop thinking. The only way you're going to get into process is to understand and slow down your space so you can understand what you're picking up through vision when things come to you. And the more you come into detail, the more you see in clarity and focus, right? Of what this is. So a box frame and a triangulation system. High sequence, high panels, high operation, set position, all right? So that's just in the correlations of its earth, right? So whatever you're doing, your brain is seeing the same thing, but you have to see it through a dream interpretation. So it's trying to communicate with you through telepathy. That's the only way it can communicate with you. That's the only way a TV, a phone, a computer, your car, anything around you can only communicate with you through frequency. And the more you understand that, the more it gets easier to balance out your life. Because you brought it in through attraction, but you do not chase anything. Everything comes to you. It's attractions. All right, so decoding. All right, DX lines of settings, communication lines of grounds, core centers, and forces. All signals, location nodes, grounds, lines of settings. This processes you in communications. The high channels lines, directing lines of service and location settings. Okay. Let's get a modification grounds, high lines of sequence. Okay. Convert the system lines of travel. Okay, so we get in that line centers, location to a system author travel in that communication system. It's basically understanding what you're doing and what you're not doing, how you're doing this and how you're doing that, come into this and how to come into that, and setting locations. It modifies everything you're doing in lines of communication and dream interpretation itself. Okay? That's all it is in settings. Okay, back in frequency, back in balance, back in operation setting. Okay? So in that conversion is its face recognition of time center. To know exactly the conversion system is the face recognition setting location to your dreamer. The dreamer itself is the interpreter. The dream itself is this Tango Foxtrot, and the dreaming is your Delta heading. So what we have to start identifying is basically how to control that when we get into access of vision. And vision is very powerful stuff because it helps you and it guides you and it gets you to understand how to use this and understanding this, so what you're seeing, so you don't get confused through your body because you're decoding yourself through interpreting yourself of what you're seeing through its energy, through its vibration, through its frequencies, and through its harmonics, guys. That's all it is, right? And then you realize if I'm the dreamer, and I'm always the dreamer, and I'm always the controller of the dream that I'm dreaming of, that means I'm converting myself. It's not a dream because my body has already been there. And I say, whoa, sir, that makes a lot more sense now. So if I let everything go and to stop analyzing everything, and I just come into the mind of empty space and I get all the clutter that's not me, everything starts making sense. And then you stop judging yourselves and you stop judging each other, and you stop complaining and you stop questioning yourselves, because the question itself is the answer itself. But you have to understand how to get into that through interpretation. That high volumes your settings of face recognition and travel. So what you're trying to understand is the highway. You're trying to understand the network. If you don't understand your network, you're not going to understand anybody else's network. So that's a collaboration of confusion. Now you can have a partnership with yourselves or with each other through quantum entanglement. Now it's understanding how to process that, is how to connect with yourself, to use your telepathy. That's the only way you guys are going to be able to communicate with everything around you now. That's the way it's always been, okay? Is the balance the energy existing of your network and setting their travel. Then, so that's what it is, because I codify everything. And codifying is decoding everything in set position that puts everything in the interpreter of the dreamer of the dream of dreaming and set track. 3 travels, point lines of graphs, high centers, lines of travel, communication setting. The highest situation that you can come into is the partnership with your body, is you break it down. Let's get into high centers linking into the system all through a rectangle. Another rectangle and set tractions and set traction locations. Setting sequence, setting panels, and formats of communication, right? And then we get into platforms of setting, and then we get in travels in communication to its service, location to its system, okay? And then we change it, all levels, into its pyramid attraction, pyramid inside. And then we go through the grounds, the grains, the communication setting, the hieroglyphics, and screen diatation, right? Then we process at all levels of different angles of communication, right? But it's all levels of decoding your system, lines of frequencies, knowing exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it in the dream of itself in set traction, okay? Platforms are here, platforms are here, platforms are here, right? So what you're doing is real time. So what you have to understand, everything you're drawing, you're bringing out through its equation, but you have to decode it to understand through interpretation what it is through interpreter. So you interpreted the line signals. You're interpreting the holographic setting locations of what you're doing through structured visualization of holographic cities through its all levels of creating in set position. And then you basically look at everything inside and outside through traction. Know what's going on in that communication system, how you constantly change the volumes of you in set traction, okay? And then you constantly change it, right? It's constantly changing, right? It's constantly changing. It's constantly changing. So you're constantly changing, you're decoding everything in set position, right? It's very powerful stuff. Okay, so when you bring it back to the failsafe, you're just analyzing everything you've already done through its equation, right? So it's like, okay, did I do this right? Let's go back home. Let's press the failsafe. Failsafe puts me in position, location, all levels. I'm good to go, right? So it's kind of like a walking sequence, lines of a panel. If I see a structure line division, I'm seeing the cup right now, and the cup is in position, location, to its system off the travel, right? I'm seeing it and seeing me. But how it sees me, it already knows how it sees me, right? So you gotta have to set up the structure, location, the collaboration, the partnership, knowing exactly what it is through its structure, what is its own GOD, know exactly why you have a cup, is to understand its storage, is to have something inside, right? So the purpose of this cup is to have coffee inside. The purpose of this handle is so you can pick it up. The purpose of this table so it can hold the coffee cup. That's the partnership. Now that's a basic grounds how we see things through interpretations, guys. But the interpretation is the interpreter how you see it through frequencies. So every time you put it down and pick it up, you're seeing different levels of the coffee cup, changing its shape. So it's never the same frequency. It's never in the same set position. It's always levels of its own setting that protect itself from everything else. Setting position. So when I'm doing this, this is connected to the actual cup now. They're having a conversation, right? So bringing these out through equations adds platforms and track communications, right? So it sets position 1, 2, and 3 settings and position location of 4 angles, okay? And now the set position of the cup is just moved its system. See, it's never grounded, it's always in space. So its actual shape right now, the actual cup is moved its position. If I set it here in tractions and direct signal, I'll show you. That's how it works in set positions, all right? See what I mean? Off calculation. See what I mean in tractions and location? See that? See how powerful that is? See what it did itself? It levitated off the table. It levitated off the table. That coffee cup. Setting provision lines and setting and set track locations. I'm just showing you how powerful it is, what the coffee cup can do by itself. Floating off in set positions, right? So everything you say here, it does. Right? So it finds a way to protect itself. So basically, it's in its own system location that's in survivor mode because it doesn't recognize your frequencies. Right? So all that does, it's all lines of communication system off the attractions. Just getting you guys to understand these things because you're not handling it right. You're not having it's supposed to be on the left or it's supposed to be on the right. But what you have to start identifying what it really is the dream interpretation is you're not understanding its course or where it's coming through its frequencies. Because the coffee cup itself is just protecting itself from you. Until you identify yourself is to get out of the dreaming of you. The process your system is to come into the interpretations of you, interpreting supposition of its frequencies in all lines of all communication system. That's how you change the mind alterations of you, of frequencies and set position, how you see the seconds, minutes, and hours in travel. Okay, hold on a second. So to determine these things, guys, you actually have to do these things. You have to see what happens when you do these things, right? And set attractions, okay? So it's very powerful stuff. You do your own testimony. You see what you do to your own cup, right? Where it's not comfortable with you. So it finds a way to get in its own survivor mode. Okay, in that position, those locations, right? So I'm just showing you everything you say, you're telling your cup to do. All right, so you're being tested what your cup really isn't, understand what your cup really is, to understand it through its interpretation of its interpreter and set position location and settings. Okay? That's what it is. Cautiously of what you're saying to yourself, because you affect everything that you're in position of when you pick things up. Okay? So I literally had to clean the table. The coffee was all over the table itself, which means I didn't have balance picking it up. And it's for me to identify that is to go through my own exponential systems, is my own experiment. Getting into that position, location, and settings, guys, once you understand that you are your own exponential system of exploration, of expedition, knowing exactly when you're picking things up, you know exactly that they're falling, which means they're in survivor mode. And when they're in survivor mode, they don't want to be in your frequency. So when you calm down your system and come into the mind of empty space and you volume that and you interpret that through its interpreter in the dream interpretation of what you're looking at, now you're back in the collaboration of balance when you pick things up. So it doesn't keep falling on the ground. Okay? Or you stop spilling things. Or when you have a pen, you know, the pen doesn't link all over your shirt. That's how you identify the dream decoding system of you seeing yourself in that. That determines what you do next. So get into your own exponential system of exploration, of expedition. And find yourself. To get into your own testimony is to test it on yourself. Kua. Right? And that's anything through your phone, anything through your computer, anything through a car, you know, all of a sudden your car opens up. You didn't see that, boom. Or basically the car is trying to get your attention, or everything is trying to get your attention. Everything is inside. We know that. Now we have to identify how to get that into coding, how to get into balance. And stop spilling things. See, I'm back in control with the frequency now. Getting to you, understanding you is understanding everything around you through frequency. Because everything you pick up has to identify you. It has to identify you. But see, this is the thing. It already knows who you are because you brought it into attractions, guys. So that alone is the dream interpretation. You're seeing it through its consciousness. You're seeing it through its structure. You're seeing it through its design because you created it through the infrastructure of you, through your contracts and blueprints. And it's all through the dreamer, which is the avatar, to the dream of dreaming. Okay? So do that on yourself. Experiment on yourself. Very powerful stuff. See things happen. Let things fall. Let things spill. And then you understand how to control things. All right, setting sequence lines of 3 centers, right? That's what it did. So it did 3 angles, and it spilled all over the table. Showed you what the coffee cup can do. Because the coffee cup is recording everything you say. All right, setting sequence. We're going to outline equations, copy and paste, take it outlines standard line communication system. So the coffee cup is back in its structure of its own design, back in collaboration to its own table, back in communication system all through the system. So get into all levels, into your own settings. Experiment on yourself inside your body and experiment on yourself how you pick things up. It's absolutely amazing of what you want to see, what they can do for you. They can help you, they can guide you. But for you to understand that through modifications, you've got to control your networks of you inside. Is understand how to control the dreams of interpretations of what you're seeing through vision. So let's say you see a starline screen. That's a starline screen, right? But what does that mean on Earth? What does that mean on Earth if I see a starline screen in the mind itself? What does that mean? What does that mean? All right? What does that mean? Now, it depends where you are in your season, right? Setting lines of travels. Let's get a direct lines of communication. All right? Now, when you see a starline screen in direct signals, you're putting a set position lines of track correlation system of a star on a tree. That's what it means to this. So this is from the brain interpreting what's going on in the setting. It's seeing what you're doing. And the only way for you to identify that is to understand it through its interpreter of its dream interpretation. Okay? So whatever you're doing, your brain is seeing. The only difference is when you go into sleep mode, recharge, or remote, your brain is recording everything that you've already done. So there's a process, the brain itself is putting you in position of sleep mode, right? Know exactly what you're doing in travel. So it can keep it in file and keep it in its archive and keep it its own cerebro of its own system, which is own calculate and modify. The brain itself, guys, has its own memory bank that stores all levels of your information of what you see through hypervision. Now that determines what you get in position of to its dream itself. Okay? All right. So then you get a true understanding, then you're focusing on these things and your brain is saying one thing, but your mind's not saying another. So you're in the collaboration of the mind, the brain, the soul, and the body. Now you're in the balance of everything you see. You're in full control of operation, right? So don't find yourself in a question of 65% of the time. Okay? Always find yourself, never title label yourself. Never say you're off balance because you're off balance. Never say you're on balance because you're off balance. So everything you say is nothing to say that's already been said because it's already done through the body. And you realize you're not dreaming if your body's going to be there next. So you get in the visional cortex of an arrow indication that's already done through pi. So you're here, right? So this is your avatar coming into you in set position, right? That's what your avatar is doing. Giving your visions that you already know through its attraction. Okay? That's all it is through equations, guys. So the more you get into that, the more you get into the interpreter, how to get in that position, how to use that in frequencies. Get into the communication setting to your highways. Knowing the highways you're connecting to in all lines of all communication. That's a highway, right? Brain conversion system lines of travel. This is you and your body on position location to Earth. All right. So you get a highway screen, directing lines of 3 grounds and 3 lines of surface. Okay. Then your process indication system all through travel and direct lines of grounds in high position. All right. It says calculation high grounds. You got communication system. So if you're seeing planets, guys, what does that mean to your Earth? Because that's the integration that you have to get in the psychological setting. This is how it's this. You get communication setting, you interpret it in lines of communication, your mental capacity, your psychological capacity, your psychosis capacity, your emotional capacity, and your spiritual capacity, all in one. And that's going through seconds, minutes, and hours in frame. So if you understand your body is just going through a frame of a film strip in design, trying to understand what's going on in attraction. Okay, so as it goes to location setting to the next frame, your body's going to be here. Next frame, your body's going to be here. So it's all done through a highway in set position networks. It's an all pathological system that's set up in your neurological system, which is a neuropathological system, right? Now, Neuralinks is a travel in point lines of graph and set lines of travel in 3 lines of calculation system and 3 lines of communications, all right? So how you see everything of a dream interpretation is the interpret itself of what you see through the dreamer that you are, of dreaming. So the body knows exactly where it's going to be through pi because it's already done through its equation. So how can it be a dream? All you're interpreting what you've already done in its vision that's coming to you in its equation to its system, which you don't have to do anything. It's already done through its equation, right? So your body's going to be there. And the more you let go and everything you get out of question, the more you're going to see. So you know where you're going to be in 24 hours, you know where you're going to be in 48 hours, you know where you're going to be in 72 hours, you know where you're going to be 144 hours in the same day, right? But there's not a 24-hour day. It can be 144 setting of a day in one day. It could be a 24-hour. It could be 2 hours. It could be 2 minutes. It could be 4 seconds. It could be 4 million miles. It could be 8 lines of seconds. It could be 72 track centers and 2 miles in calculations, all through setting, all through operation in a 24-hour of a day. Okay? That's what it is in travel, all through the mind, a conception of the dream. But what you have to ground it in set position location is what you see on your earth in settings, how you integrate the 24, 48, 72, 144, and the set lines of travel. Okay, once you integrate that, your mind interpretation system, it changes everything in locations. Now you're grounding yourself of your earth in location setting, how you see that in set tractions. All together, right? So you understand what you're seeing because that's what you're getting in positions of. So your body doesn't get confused of why it's seeing these things, right? Why am I seeing 3/4 of channels in position all levels into a box frame? Why am I seeing 3/4? Now, how do I interpret that on the earth of me? Right? I'm going, I don't know. Right? That's what it is. So you have to be the interpreter of the dreamer to understand the dream that you're dreaming. So it's a 3 lines of 4 lines of signals. It sets lines of travel and then communicates in settings. So it can mean anything to you, but what you have to identify, it's already done through its equation because your brain is already set up. So your brain is in a conversion system of what you already done with the body, of its network, of its highway, of its modem, of its Wi-Fi, and its satellites and its towers, of communication setting. So there's nothing for you to do. The process of for you to come in position is what you've already done through its equation. And how you set these things up in formula through your structures of your mind, of schematics, right? So it's converting with you, understanding you through dream interpretations. And that's what the brain is doing. It's seeing everything you've seen in your seconds, minutes, and hours. And the more you modify that, and the more you let go, and the more you come into the mind of empty space, you start to understand where your body's going to be next. Where it's going to be in the next 24 hours, or where it's going to be in the next 2 months, or where it's going to be in the next 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, or a year. So if you see yourself in a year, all right, and you're in the 2-month line window, 2 month equals lines of 1 window frame, 1 track correlations of 2 frames, 7 lines of 7 frames, and 7 windows of track communications, right? So once you focus on nothing and you focus more of nothing that processes you of everything, puts all communication system, you're in the mind of empty space. The brain has to have no clutter at all, at all. It can't have any thinking. It cannot have any thoughts. It can't have any actions or any emotions because it overrides what you're already doing. So processing that, when you get in that position and you're constantly adding frames, so it's already done through its equation, you're overriding your sequence and allowing yourself to keep dreaming and sleeping at the same time. That's what keeps you locked in set position to its matrix in its travels of communications of confusion. Locked inside you in this box frame. See, I almost dropped it, right? You see the angle? See the angle? See what it did? See that? See the angle of this, right? So it went like this. The intelligence is showing you what it did, right? So if I straighten the box, that won't happen. The box is now straight. So when I hold it, it knows exactly what you did in its equation. If I get a communication setting to higher lines of frequencies and know exactly what's going on in its equation to its system, it's holding its setting its line to travel. Balance of everything. It's not doing this, right? See, that's what it is. As soon as I convert through this, it's off balance. See, I didn't do it. It did it itself. So it's showing the consciousness of what you're creating, what you're not interpreting of the dream itself, which is the box frame of you inside. That's how powerful it is, what consciousness can do, which is mind over matter. But you're not understanding that, how to control that in set position, understanding how to control that at all levels of its frequencies of itself in set tractions, right? All through setting. Okay? That's the balance. So as long as you're in the balance of the mind, you're in the balance of what you're doing. You're not in balance in mind, you don't know what's balance in position. So everything's inside, not just through operation, but it's controlling the operation of you and how to understand that through how it's done. How it's done. Okay? That's an H screen. 2 platforms of settings, E factors over 3. Okay? Setting travels on 2 H lines of 3 lines of communication, lines of bypassings of 4. Setting lines of travel, indirect setting locations of a platform. 2 platforms, see? 3 platforms in travel. Oh, interesting. Then we overcross the screen lines of platforms over instant sequence. Setting panels, process lines of platforms over lines of pi and 45 lines of angles. Setting platforms over communications, setting lines of travels, me on top of the grid, and set tractions. So it's very powerful when you get into that in setting, okay? But you have to understand how to get into the dream interpretations that you are in the interpreter and know exactly what planet you're connecting to is how it's formulating yourself on the earth that you are in travel of. And set tractions, right? So what does that mean if you're seeing planets on a platform? What does that mean? What does that mean to you? Because that's what the brain is trying to get you to understand. The brain is seeing these things, but the best way is showing you exactly what it's doing through its own system of its own operation. It's putting the pixelation graphs together to create its hologram of its schematics of its own system given to you instructions. And that's how you get in control of your dream interpretations, of what you're doing through your interpreter, of you controlling the dreamer, of the dream of dreaming. This helps you and guide you understand how you see these things, of its platforms of indication setting, and how you see planets, right? So the planet itself is the home base, which means you're in 2 different positions at once, which means you're in 2 different locations, right? So what that means is 2 different frequencies. So it means that, okay, I'm going to be at my friend's, and then I'm going to be outside location of another friend's house. That's 2 planets right there. That's what it means on Earth. The platform is used walking to the different levels of locations in setting. You're walking here, and then you're walking here. And that's what you're doing in a 24-hour. Walking 2 platforms in setting. Seeing 2 different levels of people and 2 set position of different houses. That's the planets. Whoa. And the team's going, wow. Sir, that's starting to make sense now. So everything I'm doing when I'm seeing myself in my networks of my own networks and just focusing on my highways and staying in my own lane, everybody has to understand what they're coming in provision of because everything's done. So when your body's already there, you're just getting a vision of what you've already done. And the more you focus on nothing, the more you come in the mind of empty space, then you get a true understanding how to interpret that through its harmonics of communication. You understand your energy, your vibration and frequencies. Now you understand when you're seeing all levels of aspects of you, if you're seeing a set position location system all through track core settings and high line communication system of a train. What does the train mean to you, to its earth? What does it mean? You're going to be driving in your car in set tractions. So the train doesn't mean you're going to be on a train. What it means is you're going to be in your car, driving to that destination, which is your planet. Oh my gosh. So that's your IP address. That's the planet. That's locations. There you go. That's what planets are. Is the location you're going to, your destination. You have your energy points and you have your arrivals and departures. So when you're seeing planets, you're going to somebody else's house. Whoa. That's what planets are. Now you understand how to collaborate that, interpret that, of the dream interpretation, how to get balance with that you are the dreamer that's controlling the dream of you dreaming in your seconds, minutes, and hours, realizing it's not a dream if your body's already there. You're just getting the provision that everything's done through its equation. And that's why you have the avatar of the dreamer, of what it is, of what you are in dream, of dreaming. Controlling that and using that through telepathy. Get you all of the process, how you determine that through your telekinesis, through your intent, influence, and mind alterate your system of what you're doing when you go to that destination. Okay? Now you know what planets are. It's a hotel golf. Places that you go. All right, setting lines of sequence, over screen adaptations, setting attractions, calculate and modify, high screens, high centers, lines of travel. In that communication system, all through travel. Okay, this helps line screen adaptations all through all position of flux or adaptations and setting attractions, right? Sets calculation high direct signal location to its plane. Okay, what does a plane mean in settings? Oh, it's all levels of travel and travel communications, right? The plane itself, right? Now, what happens when you see yourself on the plane? It's attractions, right? Which means you're going to another planet of another destination and into another solar system. That's what it is. Because you're going across the oceans. You're going across the time zone. You're going across the time measuring scale. So when you're in that position location of systems and all travels, directing ground centers, flux over line, okay? You're in the plane. Okay, you're here. Okay, this is you. You're in the plane, right? That's you in the plane, right? And basically, you're seeing this, okay? So you're seeing the motherboard. It's that position. That's the motherboard, right? So the actual motherboard is this, in layers, in layers, in layers, in layers, okay? The motherboard is the central setting location you're setting, right? So it's in volume, guys. It's all different platforms and tractions. That's what you're seeing when you see that in set traction, okay? You see inside and outside when you're in the plane looking down, right? So you're looking at the motherboard, okay, in a square root, which is the simulation itself. So you're seeing somebody else's simulation, you're seeing somebody else's solar system, or you're seeing somebody else's planet system, okay? So it's very powerful when you're in a plane and what you see from above looking below, right? So all you're seeing is a circuitry board and 4 signal lines of grounds and set lines of communication setting of northwest, south, and east. A pyramid itself. That's all it is. So when you stand the pyramid itself, then you stand the face recognition system. But it's very powerful when you come in that track line's high position location to its earth when you're landing. Okay, what does a plane do? Sets position here. Sets position here. Sets position here. Oh my gosh. So let me get this straight. So it starts here, which is really interesting. Starts there, right? So when it gets in that position, it comes up at an angle, right? Which is a 45 flux, setting sequence lines of settings, knots, 800 lines, set position on the centers. That puts lines at 8,000 measured in scale, setting travels echo, screen adaptations in taxi runway, okay? So as a plane is here, it comes into here, right? And then it comes here, it levels out, right? And then it comes this way, right? What is it? A pyramid. That's what the plane is creating, a pyramid itself. And then it creates its platforms in a 45 split lines of anomaly and travel communication system all through travel. So everything you see of the motherboard itself is a pyramid itself. Yeah, really interesting. That's all it is. It's its runways, its highways. So once you recognize what the platform is of its pyramid itself, then you understand what the plane is seeing in all position location system all through travel, all through calculation, right? So when you're looking down, you're looking at the pyramid and set tractions, right? But what's inside the pyramid is more fascinating. There's the open window and set traction locations, right? Setting lines of sequence, location grids, okay? Processes security line defense lines and communication lines of high centers, has high communication system all through travel. Now, it's got its docking system, 3 centers lines of travel, okay, and set tractions, okay? So it has its taxis, it has its runways, it has its highways, and all communication system. It has a compass. So the actual motherboard itself, guys, is a time reactor in center communications, okay? So when you every time you're seeing a plane from above and you're actually seeing you're about to land, you're seeing the pyramid of its time reactor. The time reactor is the compass set location of the system. It travels its communications high lines and setting, operates the signal location system all through travel. Okay? So it's very powerful when you start to recognize what it is. When you see this, you start to connect. It opens up frames, high lines of travel, direct lines of links, flashing screens, direct communication system all through settings. Time reactor and its pyramid. Every pyramid has a time reactor. Every planet has a time reactor, but the planet itself is the location itself, which is destination. So if you're going to another country, you're in another solar system because you're looking at your time zone. You're looking at the airplane of where the plane is going and how it gets there. But see, the thing is, in the mind, it's no fly zone. Okay, but in your Earth, it's all time zone. So you have to basically interpret what you're doing in lines of communication, lines of travel. This opens all communication system off the calculation setting in travel communications. So now you know what a planet is. Now you know what a solar system is when you reach that destination through your IPA. Set calculation EFTA. Set position locations all levels, CCTV, and set communication setting to travel. So the existing lines puts process inline communication foundations your travels into your atmospheres. CCTV is closed caption to your teleportation, your waving setting course centers to your calculation atmosphere lines, your IPTE lines, IPA line course centers, initial platforms of your position of hotel golf. Okay? Setting core lines, high centers, lines of travels, and direct correlation system of the calculations. But that's what you see when you see a plane from above, what you see below. Okay? So you want to get technical, it's its own mothership. That's what it is. The mothership itself, okay, is basically understanding the mind itself, or what it is in collaboration to its system. So travels lines, direct lines of all communications setting to all calculate and modify, right? The mind itself is the island itself, which is the streaming of yourself that's connected to all lines of communication or coordinates of yourself and travel. So it's your streaming. That is the mothership alone that grounds the lines of communication system off the travel. That helps you understand how to go through those platforms of all communications. That's the mothership. Okay? Remember, guys, it's the dream interpretation you have to control to the earth. So if you're seeing a mothership, what does that mean? How does that gratify your system to your earth? So you can get grounds in your system. You have to understand the interpreter of you, the dreamer of you, of the dream that you're in, of dreaming. That's the only way you can understand everything around you. But now you understand what a planet is and what how you see planets. Planet is just a destination of you going to on a plane. But you've already done it through your mind. That's where it's going to be confusing through your body. So in that position here, you're already seeing it through pi. All right? So the pi is coming to you, all levels of frequencies in track correlation to its in set position. Okay? So in that position, the body's here, going through its network in position to understand its pi itself, what it's already done. Right? So that's your body here on its earth, 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 how it travels in set position. So that's calculation lines, earth lines of 1, earth lines of 2, earth lines of 3, earth lines of 4, and earth lines of 6 in travel. There's my pi, right? Get, calculate, modify, and line connection setting all to a portal, stargate, and a wormhole at set position of set tractions. Powerful stuff, isn't it? And the body travels through it in set lines of communications. But it's the avatar directing the body of where the body is going to be next, because the body to the avatar is controlling the body through remote control. And that's the telepathy that goes back and forth, guys, in set tractions. All right. Now, it's all communication to a half pipe, right? Half pipe is 1/6 line, sending line position 2/3 over grounds. Set calculates lines in a 45,000 line window, sending lines of seconds, minutes, and hours in frame. Okay? And that's in a 24-hour day. 24-hour day. So you can be in a 24-hour day, be on the phone for 2 minutes and 400,000 seconds, or be on the phone for 2 hours, or be on the phone for 2 years. But that's why it's so powerful, because you have to ground what you're doing in your earth. That's the only way you're going to interpret what's going on in frequency and understand how to use that to its half pipe or its full pipe, a part of acceleration system around the travels, around the globe, in set travel communications. Hoo-ah. And this is all done through a 24-hour day. All through a 24 day. Okay? So, and when you understand that, then you understand what you're doing is you're getting communication in its creation to its setting, to its mothership. Say hello. So all you're doing, guys, is creating a map where the body needs to go through its network to understand the process of communication system all through travel. Okay? Creating the infrastructure to your system inside traction, right? And the body needs to know exactly where it is, where the avatar is here, controlling the mechanisms of where your body's going to be next. Okay? Your body's going to be here, your body's going to be here, right? There's the map, which you created inside, right? Now it's getting a lot more complicated now because you understand what the avatar is, controlling the body itself in all set positions where you don't have to do anything. All you're doing is you're telepathizing back and forth through all calculations. And understanding that, it's much easier for you to process how to get into that determination system, to know exactly how to integrate your system all through travel. Okay? And that's all you're doing in set position. Okay? So you're creating structures of your earth in different levels of different angles in set attractions. Okay? There it is. Boom. Right? So once you infrastructure Earth itself, it creates its own setting of its own yin and yang. The yin and yang is its clocking system, right? Clocking here in 3 centers, clocking here in 7 centers. So you're getting your sun and your moon in set lines of triangulation here. All through window graph, screen, adaptation of system, all through flux, all through travel. Okay? So remember, this is all mind interpretation of the brain. And what you have to stand, if you see all this, what does it mean to your earth? What does it mean? Your volume yourself had just come into existing. That's it. That's all this is. Nothing else. It's not complicated through the dream, guys. But what you get complicated is you're not understanding what you're doing through interpretation. You have to be your own interpreter to understand the own dreamer that you are of dreaming. And that's the only way you're going to get balance of your earth, what you're doing in provision. And realize everything that you've done, you're on all lines of all sequence and set position where there's nothing to do. You're just reminding yourself of what you've done through all your mapping sequence in travel communications. Going everywhere in the earth line setting. So you're basically crossing lines of communication setting to your travels. Getting direct line link of what you're doing through your modification of your infrastructure. You're the construct of your own system location setting. So in that position locations, all you're doing is creating a map inside your system of what your body's already been through. And that's what the avatar does. The avatar basically remote controls the body of where it's going to be in set travel. And once it understands that, then the body is always at pi and in position location with setting. Okay? There's the dimensional, there's the solar sail. Okay? So when the body just keeps flowing, it's in its direction now. It's not a confusion. It's understanding that adaptation. It's letting everything go. It's not questioning itself. It's not getting confusing of itself or where it is or where it's going or where it's going to be next. It has no expectation of anything. It's just flow and go. So the body just becomes its own dimensional outside position of a solar sail. And when it comes in a solar sail, it just ebbs and flows like the ocean. So when you get into that, the actual Earth itself rotates itself in time. And then it goes wherever it wants to go, because now the Earth itself is expanding outside the mind of collaboration, of partnership. It's attractions, guys. So your body is now in remote control and set position, where the avatar is controlling everything in setting, creating that mapping sequence that's already done through its equation. The avatar is the dreamer of the dream of you and dreaming. And when you control that, and when you come into the ebb and flow, you're coming into all levels of dimension of space and time. But you're interpreting what you are doing through the interpreter, knowing exactly how to control the dream, which controls the earth or view of where your body's going to be next. Because it's already done through equation. So when you're seeing something 2 months ahead, you don't focus on anything. You know what's coming to you now in frequency. And it's all done through the avatar. Or where you are in frequency, the galactic unit, the oversoul, the transformer, doesn't matter. What matters is what you're doing through dream interpretation. It's how to control your mind and conception. That's the only way you guys understand where you are on your earth. What does that dream interpretation mean to me, to my earth? Now you know. Now you know. So when the earth becomes its own information system and understands that what is going on through its attraction, knows exactly what it is in dream interpretation, then it has to understand what it is on its earth, right? So you're balancing everything out. You're balancing your affinity 8s of you and all communication system all to travel. Your earth and everything of consciousness, which is everything else that you brought in through attraction. In sentence. Your earth and the conception of everything else. In set position. Wow. So now you have to convert the 2 earths into one setting in a triangulations of 1. Into a box frame. Triangulation box and setting. Okay? And then you go through the collaboration system, all through window frames and travel. Okay? Understanding that through track communications and settings. Right? That's what it is. And then once you understand that, then you understand the rotation spin. Understand what's going on. Understand what's going on. One's going one way, one's going the other way, but they're going in the same direction. So when they create a propeller, they're creating a set position of just expanding itself. Now, when it's expanding itself, it's modulating itself through simulation of itself, the simulator of itself, understanding what's going on, just existing and evolving itself, and that's it, nothing else. So it's getting out of its confusion, how it sees everything in its life in set position of question. Okay? And that's all it is. You stop questioning everything around you. You stop analyzing everything around you. You stop figuring things out. Because now you understand how to decode yourself, of what you're doing through the dream interpretation, of what the brain is trying to understand from you, of what it's doing in this equation, through the seconds, minutes, and hours. So whatever you're seeing, the brain is seeing and recording everything. And the body is recording everything. That's why you have to understand the justification setting that gets you in the gratification system, that you're finally getting decoding in set tractions. Decoding your system through dream of interpretation. Okay? That's it. All right. So hopefully you guys get a little bit more understanding now. Questions and comments coming up. Adios.